Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, witnesses, for coming today. I just had an initial comment to Bill, and is that the proper way to say your name? I'm a former person that went to university. I have 2 degrees, so I know what it's like to live close to poverty or at poverty. We had 4 children when I was in school. So we've had a lot of craft dinner. I've said this story many times to this committee. They're getting bored of it now. But I just wanted to give you a little bit of information. Federally, taxpayers spend $12.3 billion on education per year. That's federally alone. It looks closer to $35 billion if you include the provincial contributions to provincial education. Our national debt is almost $1.2 trillion when you take into consideration the federal component and the provincial component. $1.2 trillion. That's about $36,000 per Canadian in debt. It costs Canadians about 11.1% of every revenue dollar. So every tax dollar that people spend, it takes 11.1% of every dollar to service the debt, which adds up to $30 billion per year. And you had mentioned the government was making profit off of student loans. I don't see it that way from those numbers. The government borrows, what you're talking about, that money that is given for federal education, $12.3 billion, the government has to go borrow that money to pay for that. And that debt cost, so if you look at a percent in terms of interest, it's about 6 to 7%, but you could say it's an effective tax rate of 11%. You could look at it that way. It still costs government to borrow money to give to students to go to school. That's what I'm getting at. So it's not free. I think the perception is from your organization that education should be free, but it's certainly not free. And I guess what I'm concerned about is the taxpayers we talk about. It's a poverty reduction strategy. That's the focus of this study. I am concerned about Joe and Jane taxpayer that get asked to contribute more and more every day so somebody else gets something for free. And as a concern for poverty, what I'm concerned about Joe and Jane taxpayer is that we ask them for more and more every day. And pretty soon they're in poverty. And these people that go to work every day, that go do their best for their family and for their kids. And we're asking them to bear more burden of tax every day and bear more burdens of debt every day. So that's just a comment to you, Bill, and to consider for your organization. But I wanted to talk about the taxpayers, and I wanted to get to Mark and your presentation, because I think what you're doing is excellent. Not to mention you make great coffee, and I have it regularly on weekends when I watch my daughter play hockey. But I wanted to ask you, in terms of poverty, so you see a lot of people that work for you. What is the number one thing that you think is the most important to get somebody that's in poverty out of poverty?
Number one is a paycheck. Paycheck changes everything. Right now, people who have disabilities, who are on all of these pensions that John was talking about, drain on the system. By taking an individual off of those benefits and putting them into the workplace, it's a win-win, because you're saving the taxpayer the cost of the benefits, but you're also creating a brand new taxpayer. You take 5,000 people off of here in Ontario, the ODSP program. If those 5,000 people are making the maximum amount of benefits, and put 5,000 people into the workplace, making a living wage, the combination of the savings from ODSP and the contribution in taxes to the government is about $70 million. And so there's a huge benefit in removing people from ODSP or other types of benefits across the country, creating new taxpayers. And in fact, the only way in which a person with a disability can live a full life is to have a paycheck.
Right.
That is the most important thing.
And I think one thing we talk about often, we talk about poverty and having money and having a paycheck, etc. But as a former teacher and as a parent of kids and coach of kids, I think there's something that we could be said that's more important is a prosperity of person. So you see the smiles on people's faces after a hard day's work, or somebody that's got a job that hasn't been able to get a job before. That's the kind of stuff that probably makes you feel the most rewarded for what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I have one quick story that I want to share with the group. and that is a young lady who I hired 5 years ago, who is profoundly deaf. And she met me at a presentation, and she asked if she could come and work in one of my stores. And I asked her for her resume, and she had an MBA, and she had graduated from Queen's University 3 years prior to this meeting, and she had never worked. And imagine that, in the city of Toronto with an MBA, not working for 3 years. She did come to work for me as a baker, as a production worker, was an excellent worker, but was only working 3 hours a day at that time. And she was traveling 5 hours a day in order to work 3 hours.
Wow.
So that shows the desperation that's out there.
Yeah.
But like I said, it changed her life. The fact that it was her first job. She's not with me anymore. She's now working for Deloitte,
Wow.
using her MBA.
There you go.
But this was the springboard in order for her to get there.
Thank you.